Hi Rob, I hope this works for you. It's a very quick spin through of my headline research and how to use BuzzSumo. So as you know, we looked at 100 million headlines. We looked at the most shared on Facebook. I then subsequently looked at the 10 million most shared on LinkedIn and what we found. So the three-word phrase in the headline that was most shared on Facebook, bit of a surprise to us. We were expecting things like make you cry or something like that. But actually the most shared was will make you. And as you can see here from the data, it wasn't just a little bit better, it was significantly better. It got twice as many shares on average or engagements on average on Facebook as the next highest one, which is this is why, and then can we guess. So these are classic Facebook style headlines, I suppose, but will make you as a phrase really stood out for us. And in terms of understanding why, I think it's because it contains an implicit promise. It's a linking phrase, so it connects the content to the impact. So this content will make you laugh, cry, be smarter, etc. And here are just a few examples. So 24 pictures that make you feel smarter, travel tips that make you feel smart, harsh truths that make you a better person, etc. So I think it's got a strong promise. When we looked at headline length, we were a little bit surprised by the results on headline length as well. So what we found was that actually we simply took the 100 million, took the number of words in each headline and saw which got the most engagements, and we got almost a perfect bell curve, which is really unusual. So we can see that around 15, 16 words was the optimum for a Facebook headline, or rather for a headline shared on Facebook, which was much higher than we expected. Although when you start looking at headlines, it becomes apparent why they're so long. Quite a different picture when we looked at headlines shared on LinkedIn. The blue line here is that Facebook line. I just haven't drawn the final part of it. The red line is LinkedIn, and we can see for LinkedIn the optimum is closer to 8-9 words as opposed to the Facebook, where we're closer to sort of 16-17 words. So it seems that shorter headlines in B2B works better. So we looked at the top phrases to start headlines, and no surprise when you look at Facebook, list posts dominate. They do really well. So all the ones highlighted here in red are list posts: X reasons why, X things you, X of the X ways to, etc. There are others. This was interesting, was the third, fourth and fifth most interacted, and also the eighth there. So was also quite strong, but list posts was strong in Facebook. When it came to B2B, it was slightly different. The most shared phrase at start headlines by some margin was how to. So when we looked at particularly two-word phrases at start headlines, how to was significantly higher. But you can then see list posts, even in B2B content, the X things, X ways to, X reasons for, X tips. So list posts seem to work equally well, but how posts were significant in B2B, which obviously they weren't in the Facebook headlines. So when we looked at what was the most shared list post number, for Facebook engagement it was the number 10. So we can see 10 was the top, followed by 5, then 15, and then we went down to 27, etc. So 10 was the top. When it came to LinkedIn, it was number 5 actually, but it's very close. 5 and 10 were really similar. What's interesting though, I think, is how the next ones are 3, 7, 4, 6. They're actually relatively short lists. So we find shorter lists working on B2B, and we find shorter headlines working on B2B. In terms of Facebook, we found emotional headlines really drive interactions. So phrases like will make you cry, give you goosebumps, tears of joy, shock to see, melt your heart, etc. The emotional stuff really worked on Facebook, but we found that didn't really work at all when it came to LinkedIn content. So on LinkedIn content, we found it was really aspirational headlines. I would say it's the sort of words you'd find in an airport bookshop. So it's top, best, successful, smart, million, billion, global world, change, grow, build, advice, habits, tips, etc. So the sorts of headlines that drive business-to-business content, quite different from Facebook. And if we do just a really simple comparison, we can see the top 3-word phrases for both side by side here. And we can see will make you, can we guess, only X in, are freaking out, stunning photos, all the ones from Facebook. Whereas the B2B ones are about the future of, normally tips, X ways to do something you need to know. In the world of the year, they seem to resonate quite well in a B2B context, for example. So you can see the differences quite clearly. One of the other things to comment on is that tribalism really drives Facebook engagement. Here were two of the most shared Facebook posts during the election campaign, and that Stormzy mashup here on the right got over 8 million views. It was huge, and we see that in political tribalism. So articles about Corbyn during the election got lots of shares compared to others, and we see people doing this on Facebook, but in the context of different tribes. So this one we know is absolutely true. Bald men are sexier, more masculine, etc. It's appealing to a tribe, and other headlines do that. Things only teachers understand, things only mums of twins understand, etc. And I quite like this one because I thought it was quite good, appealing to a really big tribe. I mean, families with kids will always have a firstborn, so you're appealing to a big tribe here. Context we found really mattered for headlines. What was interesting is "on a budget" was one of the worst performing phrases on Facebook, and I think that's because of the context. When you're on Facebook, you're not really looking for things on a budget. You might be looking for entertainment, for news, etc., but you're not necessarily looking for budget tips. But as we can see here, it did incredibly well when it came to Pinterest. So the headline, it's all about context. You can't take a perfect headline and apply it. As we can see here, just this simple analysis between Facebook and B2B, there are really big differences. I've mentioned before, but my view is there are lots of different formats that your content can take, and you can signpost these in your headline. Is it emotional content, amusing, surprising? What sort of content is it? Images, facts, charts, quotes. What's the topic? It could be a trending topic, it could be a perennial favourite like love, long life. What's the format of the content? Is it a list post, a story, a research report? And then I think quite importantly, there's the promise element. This is how to do something, how you improve things. And an example I use a lot is this one, which is a really simple BuzzFeed headline. It seems really simple until you break it down and see that it's actually got all 5 of those viral elements in the headline. It tells you what the format is, it's got an emotion, the content is type is charts, the promise is it's going to turn you into a baking whiz, quite a big promise in my case, and the topic is baking, which is popular. So I think it's interesting to break down headlines, and I think signposting readers very clearly to what they're going to get is something which helps make them click through. In my view, I think that's quite useful. In terms of using BuzzSumo, the obvious ways you can do it is to put some phrases in. So here I put "will make you" in as a phrase, for example, and this will show me the most shared headlines with "will make you" in. So, and you can see the really big numbers here are on Facebook, but we can look at how people are using that phrasing. We could also resort by LinkedIn shares just to see how it's being used in a business context. So now we've got headlines being used in a business context: make you more successful, more likable, successful, happier, etc. Again, it links into the sort of content we see on LinkedIn. But you can really try and understand for your area. So for example, if I do need to know, we can see the top need to know headlines, for example. What's interesting, so I'll go back to total shares here. I was still on LinkedIn shares. So this is now sorted by total shares. What's interesting is when I did analysis of health sites, so if I just do cancer here, I found that need to know was quite a powerful phrase when it came to health sites. And that may simply be because of need to know in the context of health, but I just picked a few here in terms of cancer. So you can use those phrases. Obviously, you can just put in any topic. Let's just put in content marketing and see the sorts of headlines. If you put a phrase in quotes, it will appear in the headline. So here it's going to show us words with content marketing in the headline. If you don't use quotes, we'll just find you articles about that topic. So these articles now are about content marketing, but they do not necessarily have content marketing in the title. So it depends what you're after. But if you want to see a phrase in a headline, stick it in quotes and we'll show you that. But what we could do is say content marketing 5, or, and then we could do content, whoops, if I can type for you, content marketing 10. And now what this will do is show me articles with 10 and 5 in that also have content marketing in the headline, so that I can see is it articles with list posts with 5 or 10. And you can see that actually there are quite a few 5s at the top here. There are some 10s as we move down, but it's not as if 10 is completely dominating this particular space, for example. So we can look at the sorts of list posts that people have created. You can also see the top words for particular domains if you want. So you can do it by simply trying some of our top words from our articles. So, I've said LinkedIn.com success is really powerful. And we can see here that these are the most shared articles published on LinkedIn with the word success in the title, or I could do successful. And we know that those aspirational words work really well. So you can use BuzzSumo to look at what's working for a particular domain, or what's working for particular topics, and just for specific phrases really. And you can sort by the different networks. So if I go back to that on a budget, for example, if you just wanted to test headlines, you could type in on a budget, and we can see, whilst there are a number of different ones here, but we can see how well some of those Pinterest ones are doing here. For example, we don't normally see Pinterest so high, so we can see that phrase clearly resonates in the context of Pinterest really. So that's quite easy to do. You can also just see how people are constructing headlines. So NewYorkTimes.com, we could look at I don't know, their headlines on fashion, and this will just bring us back. There's fashion in a different sense, so let's put fashion in quotes here, and then we can see what sort of headlines that they're using, for example. So you could pick any topic and see how the New York Times is running headlines on that topic or not. What's been interesting for me to see is even sites like The Guardian, which personally I think it's gone downhill quite a bit in recent years, but if I do list posts or articles with 10 in the title as an example, they just do loads. So 10 questions off Trump's agenda, 10 tips being a better parent, 10 of the UK's small towns, top 10 books, 10 of the best clips from Wuthering Stance. There are just so many. If I'm looking at the last year, if I go back the past 5 years, it gets even more. There are even more and more list posts beginning with 10. So even some of these, I suppose, more respected sites are beginning to use, in my view, list posts. So you see 10 truths about Europe's migrant crisis, 10 reasons not to vote UKIP, etc. 10 bookshops you should visit, 10 key performances of Alan Rickman. The Guardian are using list posts as part of its strategy. Clearly it's writing lots of other content as well. But this way you can choose any domain and see for particular phrases or words what's working for them. Or as I say, just put in a topic and just have a scroll down through the headlines. But so, for example, I follow Social Media Examiner, which you may do. They get a lot of shares in our space. They get a lot of shares, really. But when you look at their content, they only publish two types of headline, in my view. It's either a list post or a how-to. There are some variations, but you can see there's 26 how-to, list post, list post, list post, why we accept, how-to, another how-to here, for example, tips, which are sort of how-to. They're really either list posts or how-to. So by analysing a site, you can sort of analyse the way their headlines are working as well. And then obviously you could, if social marketing tips were something you're looking at, you could look at how well that's been used as a headline. So anyway, there's some initial thoughts. I hope that's helpful. I'll see you soon.